Give me 1 second here. I'm going to steal a Pickleball Pursuit intro from an old bread and butter drop because my editor said it would be a good idea. The newest bread and butter paddle is finally here, and you know what that means. It's time to get fat. What the? Lars? Roll the damn B-roll. If by the end of the review you find that this paddle is for you, my code RAFA will take 10% off at checkout, and it goes a long way to helping out the channel. How's it going, y'all? I'm Rafa, the Pickleball Tech Dude. I'm an ex-PPA employee, a Harvard-educated engineer, and a seasoned pickleball product tester. I get a few comments every now and then from people saying that I should cut the explanation after my intro, but I feel like I'm at a stage where a lot of you guys probably still don't know who I am, so I'm gonna keep saying it, and maybe around like 10k subs I'll stop. Anyways, let's get to the real reason why you guys are here. If you're watching this video the day it comes out, the newest addition to the bread and butter line, the Fat Boy, drops in just a few hours, and you're probably looking to put on a few pounds. To your pickleball bag, that is. For all my fellow paddle nerds, I'm going to throw up the hard data I collected about the paddle on the screen now, and if you need a few seconds, feel free to pause the video here. But if you're not a paddle nerd, don't worry at all. I'm going to take you through a brief summary of my 2-week on-court experience with this paddle and discuss some places where the data might back up some of the thoughts I have about the paddle's performance. The bread and butter Fat Boy is a standard shaped paddle with an arrow curve to the top. And it is, to my knowledge, one of, if not the only, standard shaped paddles on the market with a hybrid Kevlar T700 raw carbon fiber face. And I'm going to get this out of the way now because I know somebody in the comments is going to say, did he just say standard shape instead of wide body shape? And yes, I did, because dimensionally this paddle is standard shape, not wide body. This might just be my personal opinion, and I'd love to know what other people might think in the comments, but for me, a wide body paddle is a paddle where that ratio of length to width goes lower than 2 to 1. For example, if you had a total length of 15.9 inches with a width of 8, that is a ratio of less than 2 to 1, and therefore would be considered a wide body paddle in my eyes. I have a video coming out on Thursday with more of my detailed thoughts about how we name shapes in the industry, but for now, that's all you gotta know. With that out of the way, let's talk performance. The main characteristics that the Fat Boy boasts, similarly to any other standard or wide body paddle on the market, is a low swing weight, high twist weight combination. At a swing weight of 110, this categorizes the Fat Boy in my eyes as a low swing weight paddle, meaning it takes pretty minimal effort to swing the paddle quickly. I definitely felt some slightly faster timing to my long swings like drives, but where I noticed the biggest difference and where I think most people will is at the net with hands battles, flicks, and rolls. I think most people, including myself, play with paddles that have swing weights anywhere from 115 to 118 on average, and so if you happen to know that for a fact, what you'll notice differently from switching to the Fat Boy is that you're able to make up for your hands being out of position a little bit more, especially in hands battles, which can be a good thing and a bad thing, but there is also definitely a learning curve with the timing on rolls and flicks. Because I'm used to a heavier swing weight paddle, I noticed I was getting a lot of miss hits when I was first using the paddle because I was literally swinging too fast. Those shots are very dependent on up and down movement of the paddle in order to swipe the ball. And so for me, coming from a paddle that feels a little bit slower to go through the air, I found myself getting a lot of miss hits on the edges of the paddle in the beginning because I was literally swinging too fast. That definitely becomes an advantage of this paddle though the more you play with it, especially due to how soft it plays, which I'll discuss more on later. Any twist weight above 7 categorizes for me as very high twist weight, meaning that the paddle will feel very solid and stable and show minimal twisting on an off-center shot. And where that stability really shined through for me was any position where my opponent was in a position to hit the ball very hard at me, mostly with blocking drives at the net and with mid-court resets. The Fat Boy is definitely a very solid paddle to play defense with because it was a very rare occurrence for me to feel like the paddle twisted uncontrollably off kilter on one of those off-center shots. This is something that's very common among standard shape paddles and something that makes them very enjoyable to play with in my eyes. When it comes to power and pop, the Fat Boy is definitely an interesting case. The average ball speed I was able to achieve with the bread and butter Fat Boy was 51.8 miles per hour, making it the softest hitting paddle in bread and butter's line. This came to a surprise to me because the Fat Boy is Gen 2, meaning that it's thermoformed and is also foam injected around the edges, which tends to give paddles a little bit more flex and power. It also has a slightly higher than average balance point, making it feel more head heavy, and head heavier paddles also tend to hit harder. The reality is that you feel the softness of the Fat Boy in-game. Now, this is a non-issue if you're a control-oriented player who tends to hit third shot drops over third shot drives, because the shot accuracy with the paddle is actually pretty great. But when it comes to players who prefer more power and are looking for the passing shot or the overhead that's going to end the point, you're definitely not going to get anywhere near that with this paddle. There's also two attributes, including pop, that I felt like were influenced by the weave of the paddle, which is why I'm going to discuss it a little bit now before we get to spin. Even just visually comparing this paddle's weave to other hybrid carbon fiber Kevlar face paddles, for example, the Thrive Azul or the Mavericks Havoc 15, you can just tell that this weave is tighter and the squares and threads are a little bit smaller. Now, I bring this up because generally control-oriented paddles and paddles in general that hit with a certain level of power tends to be correlated with their pop level as well. So you'll see a soft-hitting paddle not have a lot of pop, but that seems to be the opposite case here with the Fat Boy. In my opinion, the Fat Boy plays with a little bit more pop than you might expect from a control-oriented paddle. Now, I can't give you any solid numbers right now because I'm working on a new methodology to quantify pop that's a little bit different from what's out there. But what I can say from an on-court experience is that the ball feels a little bit more lively than I expected off the face, in particular on short swings and when you're defending aggressive dinks. And now the only way that I can explain this phenomenon brings me to my recent testing and comparison of the Honolulu J2K to the J2K Pro, where the only difference between the two is that the Pro contained a tighter Kevlar weave. I tend to recommend just the regular J2K over the J2K Pro because the only clear advantage that I recognized to the Pro was a significant increase in pop. I'll need to see some more tightly woven Kevlar containing faced paddles in order to confirm this theory, but it seems like by having this tighter weave, you're able to achieve a little bit more pop than you would with the standard Kevlar weave size. It might also be what contributes to the stiffness that I feel in the face of the Fat Boy, which of course lends itself to being a softer, more control-oriented paddle overall. The Fat Boy imparted 2,054 RPM spin on the ball on average during my testing. Both my power and spin testing were done with a Stalker Pro 3S radar gun. For me, in the spirit of trying to hold paddles to higher and higher standards as technology gets better and better, I want to compare this number to what I've been hitting recently, and to be honest, being at just over 2,000 is not going to put yourself into a high spinning category nowadays. If you asked me 3 or 4 months ago, or even back in 2023, being over 2,000 RPM would 100% put you in elite category of spin because that's what we thought paddles were capable of to be under legal limits. And that's to say that this paddle can absolutely shape the ball. I experienced that myself on the court. The difference is that with coarser peel plies and with new carbon fiber layups coming every single day, paddles are capable of even higher spin than we ever thought before. And so for me personally, the goalpost to be an elite spin paddle has shifted to where you need to be close to or over 2150 RPM. All that to say that the Fat Boy has a perfectly acceptable amount of spin that's probably at the same level, if not better, than the paddle that you're currently using. However, if you are using one of these paddles that is in the more elite level of spin, or if you have hit them before, the amount of dip you're going to experience on the ball, especially on long swings, is just not going to blow your mind quite the same way. And I actually have very similar thoughts about the sweet spot in this paddle. It's 100% wider and more consistent if you're transitioning from an elongated paddle. However, it doesn't contain the same level of plushness and forgiveness as we've come to expect from Kevlar paddles or true wide body paddles like the Spartus Apollo. That being said, due to the very nature of the standard shape of the Fat Boy, it's very easy to find the sweet spot, and I found very little issues controlling the accuracy of my shots. It is also worth noting, however, that when I explained earlier that the balance point of the paddle leans a bit head heavy, aka towards the upper tip of the paddle, that also makes where it's most comfortable to make contact with the ball higher up the paddle face as well. And where I experienced the most stability and forgiveness was towards the bottom of the face, towards the handle, and this might have contributed to my feelings that the paddle wasn't as forgiving as I expected. All that taken into account, the last thing I want to discuss about the Fat Boy is the outstanding design. I think the very name Fat Boy is a testament to Bread and Butter's image. They're not afraid to be out there and weird with their design and marketing, and they make very consistently competitive paddles. The sky blue edge guard contrasted with the midnight blue DuPont Kevlar is really, really nice looking, and I prefer this color Kevlar a lot more than the red Kevlar that most companies use. And of course, you get the continuity of that sky blue onto the lettering of the paddle, and then the pink highlights. It just all ties together really sweetly. only have one teensy tiny OCD qualm with the design. And so if you look at the lettering in the bottom corners, it doesn't follow the shape of the paddle perfectly. It does in the 5 and 7 o'clock positions towards the very bottom, but then as you go upward towards the 4 and 6 positions, the words start to flare inward a lot more than the paddle does. I'm definitely being very nitpicky with that comment, so take it for what you will. Last note I'll have on the design is that the length of the grip is only 5.3 inches, which in and of itself is not enough room for the average person to put 2 hands on it. However, if you play a little bit more like me and you like the one finger up the back for that little bit added control on the two-handed shots, then you actually probably won't notice that length at all. But that's it. That's, in my opinion, everything that you should know if you're considering going and getting the bread and butter Fat Boy. I'm going to find the full drop schedule and put it in the video because today there's only a limited quantity 250 paddle drop. So if you miss the drop today, there will be more opportunities in the future to get the Fat Boy if it sounds like the paddle for you. Remember to apply my code RAFA at checkout to get a nice discount on the paddle and support me as a smaller creator. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much just for watching and for your support. And I hope you stay happy and healthy until the next one. Peace.